How's everyone doing today? Hope everyone's doing well. As usual, yeah, gonna have a fun day today. Looking at some cool Swatch packs. Super exciting, right? I actually have a small surprise for you before we get started. Sweet, Chris is here. Excellent. I'm gonna be right back. I was a little misprepared, and but I'll be right back. I have something special for you, a YouTube premiere for a little somebody. 1 second. I'll be right back. Boom. This is Luna, everybody. And yeah, she's cute. She's 8 weeks old right now. And yep, we are going to find, we have a new home for her. She's a puppy that my dog had. And yep, she's going to find a new home tomorrow. So, yep, this is her last opportunity to be a YouTube star. So she's super cute. We're going to miss her. And yeah, she's good. I'm going to go put her back now. But everyone say, hello, Luna. Isn't she cute? Oh my goodness, going to miss her so much. Okay, man, she's a cutie pie. Gonna miss her. She's such a good puppy. But luckily, I think we found her a really nice home. So, yeah, super excited about that. Man, running up those stairs got me a little winded. Maybe I need to work out a little bit more. Okay. So, man, who's loving the Swatch pack? Really cool stuff, right, in the Swatch pack. I did ship a update today also for Foundation 6.8 and to the Swatch pack. So, you know, this week I've been working a little bit on Foundation 6.8 forms. There's some people that have been having some issues submitting forms and whatnot. So, not really issues. It's just some sluggishness. Excuse me, sorry. So right now, before, when you submitted a form, like there'd be potentially, depending on a lot of factors, a delay with the processing indicator. You know, if you use the contact template that I have, it has a processing indicator in there if you want to learn how to use that. And basically that'll come up when you click submit. It'll tell the user it's processing the data. And then when it's done, the processing indicator goes away. So I've made that much more performant. Like that should show up immediately when you click the submit button. Depending on your server setup, it could take a little bit before. So yeah, that's better now. Also, if your host is using this new security plugin or update for a security plugin called Snuffleupagus or something like that. I don't know. Apparently someone loves Sesame Street. And there were some issues with sending if you were not using SMTP. So it looks like we have all that nailed out, right? And also, I was nice. I submitted an update for Foundation 1 forms as well. So if you still have websites out there using Foundation 1 and make sure you test this. If you're not using SMTP, make sure you test in case you're on a host that has this new security feature. Right now is Chili Dog. A lot of people use Chili Dog. So that update happened on anything above PHP 7.2, right? So yeah, give it a shot. Update, just republish your form pages. It should all work now. Okay, so really happy about that. So let's go ahead and share my screen, right? Because we want to start diving into some swatch packs. So what we're going to do, we're going to go into foundationstacks.com demo. Okay, we're going to look at this. So hopefully you guys have downloaded the project file for this. You can follow along if you want. If you didn't, you can go over here. There's a free download section. If you click on that, that will take you to the download section on the Foundation product page on Weaverspace. And the very first one here is actually the Foundation 6 demo project. I should probably actually make it show up after the themes maybe, but yeah, anyway. So yeah, you can download that. Here, I'll download it right now. So make sure I'm using the same exact one that you guys are looking at. And it's thinking, twiddling my thumbs. Boop, there it goes, finally. Man, that took a while for some reason. Okay. Boop, there we go. Okay. All right, let's just preview locally. There we go. Sweet. Oh, we were going to look at the swatch pack page. Let's preview that. Excellent. So first, maybe I'll go through and just do a quick overview of what each swatch is, and then we'll go through and go through each implementation. Okay. So first off, the aspect ratio swatch. Okay, this is for that apparent. It allows you to define an aspect ratio for a box or a container or whatever, right? And it will resize that container to be your aspect ratio. So this is 16:9. Obviously, this one here is a 1:1, aka a square, right? So if you want to quickly make sure that something is always a particular aspect ratio, you can go ahead and use the aspect ratio swatch. So I think these are two common ones, right? Making a square is common, and then having something be 16:9 is a common format, right? 4:3 is another common one as well. Okay, so that's super useful. Next one is clip path, and this allows us to apply basically a shape to anything we want. Okay, now in this example here, I have 3 different examples here. We have a button. Okay, so this is a button. This is applying a shape to an actual button on the page. This is an image, obviously, and this is just some text, right? Which is kind of interesting. Maybe some word art, right? So it's kind of like the way of having art on your page without needing an image, right? So shapes are kind of the cool thing, nowadays, right? So this is kind of a fun thing to do. The cursor, this is pretty obvious. It just lets you customize the cursor to be whatever you want. Okay, so yep, pretty cool. This is probably going to be the display swatch. And if you notice here, I say custom visibility because that's what a lot of people are going to use this for. Okay, so in this demo, I have this little box that currently displays your current web browser size. Okay, and as you see here, there's a bunch of inline blocks. Now, as you know, these are actually containers, and by default, a container will take up the entire width of the page. However, that is something called display block. Okay, we're getting into CSS terms. Okay, and so a block tells an element to go full width, to expand as far out as you can. Okay, now with the display swatch, we can actually change that behavior. So in this example, all of these little blocks in this grid are using something called an inline block. Okay. And an inline block just says take up as much space as you need, and then the next thing will just come right after it, right? So as you see, when I resize this browser window, the blocks kind of flow, onto new lines as it grows. Okay. And then these orange blocks will hide and show based upon the browser size. So this particular one is hide. It'll hide from 0 to 600 pixels. This one will hide at 650 to 925 pixels. And if you play around with this, if you just kind of resize the browser, so let's resize it to like here. We're now at 860, which was less than 925. You see that we see a new one that says hide at 1003 pixels plus. And the reason I did these odd numbers is to show you that you can do a custom size, right? It's not just, the default visibility stack inside Foundation 6 allows you to, hide based on small, medium, large, but this now allows you to show and hide content based on a custom breakpoint, okay? So a custom size of the browser window. So really cool. That I know a lot of people are going to use that for custom visibility. It was a very sought after feature. So there we go. Now we have that. The equalizer swatch, that's pretty apparent. It allows you to equalize anything. Okay. The foundation column stacks will automatically equalize, or you can, by default, they will equalize their heights. Okay. But there are other things we might want to equalize. In this example, we have a card layout. So we have 3 cards. This uses the features, has a list of features for each particular features card, right? And you see here's the non-equalized version, and then here's the equalized. So essentially this middle section here is what's getting set to be equalized. Okay. Next is Font Awesome 5 styles. So it's just a swatch just to make it really easy to style your icons. Okay, so you still need to put in your Font Awesome snippets on the page, and you can use this swatch to style them either size, color, hover colors, and all that jazz. You can, style them much easier now. A really cool one is going to be gradients. Okay, and there's a few different gradients. Here's a conical gradient, which I think is very beautiful, but in some cases it might not look great. So, you have to play around with canonical gradients to kind of make them look good. Maybe we can search online for some great canonical gradient use cases. And I'll show you how I built this one, which kind of makes it look nice. Okay. And then we have linear gradients, radial gradients. And this crazy one here is we're actually layering multiple gradients on top of each other. It's kind of crazy, right? But it looks really cool. So that's a fun one. And then lastly, this is just an example of how we can, kind of do this animated gradient. I'm doing it on hover here, but you can do it maybe on page load. When the page first loads, you can actually have this gradient load and animate on page load. Really cool stuff. SVG, it just allows you to, similar to Font Awesome 5, one just allows you to, a really simple way of styling your SVGs. So you can, set the colors. Inside the SVG stack, you can actually set a color, but this allows you maybe to define a uniform style across all your icons on the page. As you can do some hover, effects and stuff like that, as you can with any swatch. Next is table styles. So now we can go ahead and actually style our tables. Right now, the styles of our tables are pretty much set by the theme, and you can't really customize them very much. You can if you know a little bit of CSS and whatnot, but this table swatch now gives you a lot of flexibility. As you see here, this is probably a nice generic kind of table where the header's styled nicely. But this one's a little crazier where we can actually highlight particular rows, particular columns, and even particular cells and style them exactly how we want, right? So pretty cool there. Next is the toggler swatch. And I'd say the toggler swatch is probably worth the price of admission to the Swatch pack. This Swatch is just really cool. It allows you to do some really awesome stuff. I'm super excited to see what people build with this. Okay. And essentially what it allows you to do is it allows you to, we've built demos where if you hover over something with a swatch, you can apply hover styles and change the styles based on hover. If you hover over the element itself, right? And with 6.8, if you watched the live stream last week, we showed how you can even go a little step farther and you can actually trigger styles by hovering on a parent. Okay. Really cool stuff. But this toggler stack takes it to a new level. And what it allows you to do is it allows you to define events. When you hover over something, you can animate something completely different on the page, right? So, and you can do it on click or on hover. So here's an example. If I click this button, I can toggle a class and basically apply a style. And this one allows me to do it on hover. So when you hover on something, you can style something different, right? I mean, this is a very generic idea, but we can do so much with this. It's really, really, really powerful. Okay. I'm really excited to see what you guys do with this. I know it's going to be awesome. Okay. The next one, probably I would say this, I don't know. It's either toggler or transform are probably going to be my two favorite things in the Swatch pack, to be honest, in terms of wowness factor. Everyone likes shiny new things. And these two things are definitely new and definitely shiny. Okay. So transform. What is a transform? A transform allows us to transform an element. And essentially it allows us to, you can either move. Okay. So in this example, the default state of all these four squares at the top is its transformed state. Okay. So, and I made it when you hover over it, it puts it back to the default state. Okay. Just to also show you that you can animate things very nicely with a transform. So, this is moving. So you can move an element up, down, left, right. And you don't have to apply an animation like I'm having here. If you just want to have something shifted over or scaled or rotated, you don't have to apply the animation. So it could just be permanently rotated on the page, right? I just wanted to show you in this example here how we can scale, move things, rotate things, and skew them all on hover, right? One thing that's kind of cool, I think like this skew could be really interesting on a button. I should have done that in one of these examples, where you have a button and when you hover over it, the button kind of cool. I think that could be fun. Brownie points if you do that today and post it on the Weaver Space community. Okay, just skew a button and on hover, just it could be really playful, right? So anyway, I think that's going to be cool. This is kind of the granddaddy effect. I did like an entire live stream on creating this effect. Now I've actually made it in the project file you have. I've actually optimized it and made it nicer. Okay, if you notice here, essentially this does use transforms. And that orange square sweeps in, and then when that's almost done, then we have a slight delay, and then the white box animates down, right? And then when we hover out, we notice that the white box will animate up, and then once that's done, the orange box. So it's basically the opposite, right? And that's just a really, really cool. That's just cherry. That is really cool. So I want to see you guys take these swatches and build something like this. Don't copy. I mean, you can copy this, be free, use it wherever you want. But let's think outside of the box and how we can do really amazing stuff like this. Okay. And this just blows something like this. Just really makes your website pop, right? It's a small little animation that is just really cool, and people will just hover over it and just play with it, right? Because it's cool. It is. These buttons here are just some other ways that show how we can use animations with transforms on a button. Now, actually, I have to admit that these particular ones aren't very beautiful. The animations of the colors aren't too great. But after I built these, at the very top of this page, I built one with a hollow button. Now that is cool. Okay, I actually think this implementation, same exact thing, just slightly different. Same exact thing, but slightly different. Yeah, that made sense. So I think that effect on a hollow button is much cooler. Okay. I'll probably update the site and just, I'll probably pull these examples down or tweak them. Maybe I'll add a skew button here just to kind of show you can use a skew button instead. I really don't care for the color transitions on here. The color on this button at the top of the page, that is gold. That is really nice. So take a look at this. This is obviously in your project file as well. This is the better way to do it. Okay. Next, underscore is going to be a fun one. For years, people have wanted the ability, I want to highlight, the active menu item or any link. And this goes even farther and does some really cool animations, right? So in this, on the menus, I'm adding an underscore swatch, and the underscore swatch allows us, it has built-in animations into it as well. So you can do these really slick animations. And this one is really cool. I mean, that is just awesome. Especially if you notice, if you pay attention, it animates in, and then when you unhover, it basically animates out the opposite side, right? Like that's really cool. I mean, small little details like this on your site, people will play around with it and they'll stay on your site longer, right? So yeah, fun stuff like that is really fun. And I can't wait to see. Now there are a bunch of other swatches that I don't have specific demos for, but they're really awesome. Okay, I use some of these within the demos. Like, for example, this background props allows you to customize some background properties. We have a color override swatch, which we'll review. Pseudo content. I actually have a really cool demo for pseudo content that I'll probably add to this page. I came up with it today with Gary Wan. So today, I'm really stoked about that. So I'll probably actually end up creating an entire demo for the pseudo content so that you and other people can kind of see what you can do with that, the possibilities. Okay. Perspective. This is going to be definitely a very edge case swatch. It's not one you're going to be using a lot. It's either you're going to be using transforms and kind of using three-dimensional transforms, and then you want to have a perspective edge case thing on there. Maybe over time we'll get more uses and more templates using it. It's definitely an edge case one that will be used sparingly. Okay, render perf. This actually is demoed on this entire demo site. Oh, actually, this one. Okay. And this, because I was actually in Rep Reaver preview. If we go back to, here, let's go to the active website. Actually, no, I'm sorry. Render perf. This is one that I got this confused with prefetch links. Sorry. Render perf allows you to, control the rendering performance of a web page. Essentially, it allows you to tell the browser, it allows you to tell the browser to not render parts of the web pages because you know that they're not going to be seen on page load, right? So it allows you to apply a class to, let's say, a container, and then you could tell the browser, don't render this until you feel the user is going to actually require it by scrolling down the page. Okay, so it essentially makes the initial page load a little zippier. I'll have to be honest, like I've played around with this and it does work. Have I seen like my web page speed like increased immensely? Not really. But every little bit counts. So definitely, it is cool. It's definitely bleeding edge, technology. It only works in the latest versions of all browsers. It doesn't break older browsers at all. It just loads the old way as web pages always loaded. But yeah, it's a nice thing to have. And again, every little bit counts with performance. So there we go. Gutters, we can customize the gutters. Overflow, I'm sure you're probably familiar, hopefully, with overflow. We can talk a little bit about that later. There is a new transition swatch called transition multi, which we can look at. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to, there is already a transition swatch that ships with Foundation, okay? But the multi allows you to, let's say, have different transitions for different properties. So let's say you want the opacity to animate at this, speed, and then you want the transform to animate at a different speed. This allows you to find multiple transitions for a single element. So it's definitely basically a more advanced transition swatch. Unset. Unset's going to be a fun one. I actually thought about this like a couple days before I actually shipped this, and I was like, this is going to be a really cool idea. It's kind of a utility that just it'll be nice to have in our toolbox. And what it allows us to do is a lot of times if we have a style, we want to override that style. Let's say, let's just take background color, for example. Okay. Let's say we wanted to remove the background color from something. Now we could override an existing background color and then override it with either transparent, or we can override that with, a color with a transparency or something like that. But this swatch allows us to unset a CSS value. So basically what this says is unset background color. So we're not overriding it. We're just telling the browser to remove whatever you have for it, right? So it's a way of unsetting a value, a style, which could be useful. It'll be interesting to see where we can use this. Kind of what triggered my idea for this is one day someone on the forum or in the community asked how they could remove a drop shadow from off canvas. And someone suggested that they create a shadow swatch that essentially set that to be a 0 pixel shadow. So it was overriding it, but I think the proper solution would probably just be to unset the box shadow, right? So we can now use this unset swatch to unset a value. So instead of hacking it by overriding it with a 0 pixel shadow, which works, right? But the proper solution is the unsetting it or setting box shadow to none. Okay, so anyway, there we go. Prefetch links. I'd say I'm kind of like mesmerized by this. It is a library called QuickLink, developed by Google. Okay, and it is a feature that you just add to site styles. There's no settings to it, and what it does in the background. So your web page loads, right? And essentially, what QuickLink will do is after the web page is loaded, and while the user's not actively using your web page, what it will do is it'll estimate if it thinks a user will potentially click on a link. And what happens is it'll load that web page in the background. So if the user does click that, the page loads almost instantly. Okay, like for example, I'm going to go ahead and click this button swatch. I mean, that page loaded pretty instantly for me, right? And that's because I have quick links running on this demo site. And so if you click between various demo pages, I mean, they should load really fast. And I've optimized this site, to be pretty performant. Although I didn't do all the work that I did on the homepage on all the demo pages. So a lot of the speed you're seeing here on the demo pages is because of quick links. So yeah, if you just want to give your web pages a little boost, go ahead and try that quick links or prefetch links swatch. It's pretty cool. Yeah. I do have a note in there saying it's experimental. But yeah, I'm using it on this site and I'm really impressed with it. So give it a shot. And the last one is Z-index. Okay, so Z-index, obviously it allows us to adjust the Z-index of something. Okay, cool. Thank you, Willie. I appreciate that. Okay, hopefully I didn't bore you to tears yet, and you're not like, go, Joe, just get to the action stuff. Tell us how to do it all. Okay, so this is the project file. Just to let you know how I've organized this, above each demo area is a swatches stack, okay, that contains all of the swatches used, okay? So, for this particular button, here's all the swatches I used to create that, okay? So for that really cool button, it did take 6 swatches to do that, okay? Um, I'm going to review this one after we get to the transform section. Okay, so I'll come back to this button. Okay, we're not going to review that one right now. Let's go over some simpler ones. Okay, so let's start off with aspect ratio. So we have two aspect ratio containers. We have a 16:9 container and a 1:1 container. Okay. And funny enough, we have two swatches. One is a 16:9 swatch and one is a 1:1 swatch. So let's look at the 16:9 one. I go ahead and I have set the class name to be AR for aspect ratio 16:9. Then, this is all the normal swatch selector stuff. Essentially down here, you can set the content alignment. So where do you want the content to be aligned? Because, by default, it could be taller than the content. So the default will be the middle. So no matter where, what size the box is, the content within that will always be aligned in the middle. And then you simply just set this 16:9 ratio, right? If we look at the AR 1:1, okay, I could easily call this a square class, I guess, because that's exactly what this does. Content align middle, sizing aspect ratio 1:1, right? And, for like this 16:9, some people forget, you could use anything. You could use 1280 by 720, which is the same exact thing as 16:9. It's just bigger numbers, right? 16:9 is just rounded down. So you can put whatever you want in here, right? And you don't need to have the most round information. So 1280 by 720 will be the same exact thing as 16:9. Okay, just to let you know that. So yeah, there you go. Maybe it could be nice to have like some predetermined ones. I don't know, maybe not. So yeah, that's all you need to do. Really, aspect ratio is super easy. Okay, go ahead, add the class to your container, and you're done. You got your 16:9 and your 1:1. Just kind of show you. If I set the let's set the content alignment on the square to top. Let's go ahead and look at that. Okay, if you look there, because I set it's still a square, but if we set the content alignment to the top, well, guess what? Content alignment is at the top. Okay. If you can do middle, bottom. So if we did the bottom, content align, obviously the 1:1 should be down there. There it is. Boop. Right. So that's kind of where, I think having it in the middle, which is the default value, is probably most likely what you're going to want. But yeah, you have the option to set the alignment. Cool. Did this replace the whole site styles, or is the site styles then components for more? Okay, great question, James. Okay, so let me open up just a simpler project here. I'm just going to open up my sandbox project. So when you purchase the Swatch pack, it doesn't replace site styles. Okay, thank you, James. That was a really good question, actually. All it does is when you click on these plus buttons within site styles, or let me make site styles look a little bit more like what you guys are probably used to seeing. Okay, this is what site styles normally looks like, right? So inside site styles, if you click on these plus buttons and you have the swatch pack, it just adds a ton of more swatches to here, right? It actually adds, there are 0 new stacks in your library. The Swatch pack puts no new stacks in your library. Everything is accessible from within site styles. And you'll notice that all of the Swatch pack have a little plus sign. So for example, here's the prefetch links stack. Okay. And it has the little plus. So I know that this, because it has this little plus symbol in the name, I know that is associated with the Swatch pack. Okay. I added that just so we can kind of see from a glance if a swatch is from the Swatch pack or, default with Foundation 6. Okay. So again, in the general, if you notice, there's a lot in general. So there's a lot of new swatches. And if you don't have the Swatch pack installed, you're not going to see any of these swatches that have the little plus symbol. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Same thing if you had a swatches stack. So like for example, this is a swatches stack, which is just a way of adding swatches outside of site styles. When you click on the plus button, you'll notice that you have access to a lot more, right? So you'll see that there's all these ones with the plus symbol, and all of those are from the Swatch pack. Excellent. Joe, can we use aspect ratio to do cropping on images? Not necessarily, okay? You don't want to apply it to a picture stack to crop because it's going to make that image look distorted, okay? But what you can do is if you apply an aspect ratio to, let's say, the 16:9 container, or even the square container. Let's say you have a wide image, but you want to apply that background to a square. Okay. Essentially what you would do is you would create this 1x1, and then you'd add a background image. All right, let's do it. Why not? Really quick. So I'm going to go ahead and add a background swatch. Okay. I'm just going to use the same class here just so that it's quick and easy for us. I'm going to add a background image, and I'm going to add in a non-square background. Boop. Okay. So there we go. Okay. And then let's go ahead and set it to cover. Yep. Okay. Let's preview that. There we go. So that, you know, and I don't even need to have content in there. I can just delete the little header that's within it, preview. And I have what looks like an image on the page, but really it's a container with the image set as a background image. Okay. And what's pretty cool is it's responsive. So as the square shrinks, the image will continue to fill, right? So yeah, there you go. Okay. So, yes and no, right? Now, this isn't an image on the web page, right? This is different than having an image for SEO purposes. This is different because this doesn't have Google won't see this as an image on your page. Doesn't have an alt tag, right? But for design purposes, from a design aesthetics point of view, this is a square image on the page. Okay. So yeah, there we go. So yes and no. You can use it to make it look like you're cropping an image, if that makes any sense. Okay, cool. Good question. I like that. Okay, let's move on down to clip path. Let's see, that swatch stack is what is confusing me that you just showed. So that can be added anywhere to enhance a stack. Correct. So the swatches stack, it's just a way of, normally how I do things is I have the styles that I use across multiple pages, kind of globally inside site styles. Here, let me open up the actual project for this. Kind of going down on a rabbit hole a little bit here, but I think this will be a quick explanation. Let's just go here. So here I have site styles, okay? And inside site styles, I don't have a lot of swatches, right? Because these swatches are only ones that I want to make sure I have on every page or I'm using in multiple places. Then throughout my sites or throughout my sections on my site, I'll add a swatches stack above a section on a site and put swatches in there that are only for that particular section, right? Go ahead and watch the video that I did that explained how I built the homepage, and I go over all of that, right? So like here's all the swatches for my banner section, right? And if you scroll down a little bit more, here's all the swatches for the fast and modern section, right? Just so that those styles are kind of with that section. I'm not using these styles anywhere else. It's only in there, right? Another useful place for that swatches stack is if you have a partial and these particular swatches are used for the things inside that partial, well, put the swatch stack inside the partial, and then they kind of travel with your partial, right? So yeah, it's very convenient. Okay. If you attended the conference last year, or you purchased the videos for it, there's a couple great sessions on how to organize swatches. So definitely watch those. Okay. So clip path. So clip path allows us to, let's go ahead and open up the swatches for that. Okay, so here I have 3 clip paths. Okay, here's a triangle, this is a diamond, and this is a shape called a chevron. That's a shape called a chevron. Okay, and it's really simple. You just give it a class just like any other swatch, and then we have all these predefined shapes, right? So there's a bunch of predefined shapes that we can use. Okay, or you can also use a custom element, where you can actually do a custom, something that's called a polygon path. So this is definitely kind of an advanced option, right? Or you can find things online to create these shapes, okay? Or you can also do an SVG path, okay? So you can actually put in an SVG that has a clip path inside of it. This is definitely a little more advanced, because if you notice, you actually have to have an ID, and then your SVG has to have that ID. So the path that contains your shape needs to have an ID, and then you need to tell the stack what the ID is. So these 2 options are definitely on the advanced side, but they're there, right? So but let's go ahead and set this back to, I think this was left chevron. There we go. Okay, so but we have a lot of shapes that we can apply to various things. And so that's really, this is the simplest thing ever, right? So you just give it a class, you pick what shape you want, and then on here you just go ahead and put the class in there. Now on this particular one, on a button, if you notice here, I added a PT64 class. Hopefully you can see that. I added PT64 to this button because of the triangle. I wanted it taller, so I added a large top padding. Just for fun, if I delete that, if we just apply just the clip triangle to our button, you'll kind of see what it is. There it is, right? So I mean, it makes the button a triangle, but I didn't care for the look on that. The button element, the button text is kind of a little high, right? So just by adding I think it was PT64 I had in there. We'll put that back. We can see that, yeah, there we go. It just looks a little bit nicer, right? So I added some padding so that it kind of brought the words down a little bit. That's pretty cool. The next up, I have a picture stack. Now, this picture is a square image, okay? So when I apply the diamond, it will look exactly like a diamond. Had this picture been something different, let's say if I were to drag and drop an image in there, okay, it's going to look a lot different. The diamond is essentially going to be stretched out, right? So just some notes on there that, it's not going to, the clip path itself just kind of applies that to the general dimensions of the thing, right? So it looked exactly like a diamond when my image was a square, but because this is a landscape image, that diamond now gets elongated along with the image as well. So that's just how clip paths work. Okay. And then same thing here, we have a text area, and then I applied that chevron, and it clips. Again, you don't want to clip text if it's text that you want to make sure the user reads it all, because it will clip the text. So some of that content will not be readable. And again, it's just another way of adding lightweight artwork to your page. This essentially, you can have some sort of nice element on your page that looks like an image, but it's actually just text in a clip path. So it's super performant, going to be faster than loading an image onto the page. There we go. All right. That's that. Fernando says he prefers to have all of his styles inside site styles. Hey, it's all up to you. I provide the tools to have a flexible workflow. You do what works best for you. Okay. So yeah, you do what works best for you. If having everything in site styles makes your life easier, be my guest. That is not wrong. Because it works for you. So whatever works for you works for me. Cool. The cursor, this is another, just a really easy one. Okay. So yeah, I mean, in here, you just go ahead and choose what cursor you want. As you see, there's lots of them. I don't have all of them demoed here. A lot of them are, right? And then you can kind of preview what that cursor is when you're selecting all of them. And then essentially, whatever you put this class on, when a user hovers over that area, you will get that class, right? So you can have some fun. If you notice this button that says none, that basically makes the cursor invisible. So you could really have some fun with people and mess with them just by making their cursor disappear, and they'd be like, what the hell's going on? Interesting thing. I'm not sure if we all want to do that to our visitors, but yeah, you can remove your cursor. It's kind of cool. So anyway, there's all kinds of things that you can do with these. Maybe if you're an example, like maybe if you're using a launcher stack and you want to change the cursor to the zoom in cursor when someone hovers over it, that's a really great use case right there. Okay. That's a perfect use case. So you can create a cursor, a zoom in cursor swatch, assign that to the launcher stack or to whatever, right? Or maybe the new link stack. And you want to have that. There you go. That works too. So anyway, I think, a lot of these are interesting. I think probably some of them will get a lot of use and some of them won't get much. I think the zoom in and zoom out ones will possibly get the most use, right? Maybe you can replace, when you hover over the close button in a light box, maybe you can have the zoom out instead of the default kind of pointer button. Just an idea, right? So yeah, cursor swatch. It's cool. Not much else to it. I'd love a custom SVG cursor. Maybe in the future. That is definitely pretty advanced stuff there. And a lot of times you can't do SVG. It has to be like a certain image format. So that's the reason I didn't add that, is because it's really not a simple thing to do. So yeah, maybe eventually though. Okay, display. If you're really interested on how I did this little pixel box thing, all the code's right here. It's just this little code in the JavaScript stack. That's the JavaScript code just to that populates this little header with the content. Yeah, pretty simple stuff. It's some relatively simple JavaScript. And just says whenever we resize or the page loads, essentially get the current browser size, and then replace the contents with the current browser size. So yeah, cool. If you ever want to figure out, not sure why you would want that on your particular website, but there you go. Okay, so if you look here in this example, I have a bunch of container stacks. And as we talked before, normally a container will go the full width of whatever you're within, right? So a container will always try to grow as far as it can. But this display swatch, if you look here, I created a swatch, called it class inline block. Then I can set the display property. If you notice here, there's a lot of different values. I'm not going to review all of these values. If you'd like to know what some of them are and what some of them do, feel free to research the CSS documentation to learn about all of these. I will be talking about two things today. We'll be talking about inline block or inline. Inline block and inline are very similar. Most of the time you're going to want to use inline block, okay? And then we're going to be talking about none. which is how we can do some custom visibility. So here I created a class called inline block, and I set that to be inline, display inline block, surprisingly, right? And I added that to each of these containers. So every single one of these containers has the inline block class. And what that does is it makes the container basically sized to the width of its content. So if you see these orange blocks are a little bit wider, this one's actually more narrow than this one, is because it will shrink down to the size of its content. And then what all the content that's within it will just kind of start piling on top of each other, or not on top, but next to each other. Okay. So this is definitely a valid layout. And actually, it works very similar to buttons. I don't know if you've noticed with buttons, but if you have two button stacks directly on top of each other, they will actually be next to each other in preview. They won't be on top of each other. And that's because buttons by default are inline. They're not display block. Okay. So that's pretty simple, right? How to get the inline block. So that's what we can do if you want something like that. Next, now let's look at how we can use some of this display none. Okay. So if you see here, I have 3 different display swatches that hide based on different breakpoints. So for this one, I have a class called hide small, and I set that to be display none. And then it displays none at a custom breakpoint. So you click on the custom breakpoint and you set that to be 0 to 600. So from 0 to 600, whatever I add this class to will be hidden. Right? And I apply this little force button just to use the hammer. Put the hammer down on it. Force that style. Okay? Next up, we have hide 650, which sets to display none. Custom breakpoint from 650 to 925. So as you see here, you can define the exact breakpoint from a small side to a larger side. So this gives you very granular control. Next up, I have hide 1003. And essentially, I just wanted it from hide from basically 1003 pixels above. So what I did is I just set the minimum to be 1003. And then I just set the maximum to be 10,000. I mean, I don't know anyone that's going to have a browser 10,000 pixels wide. So I just set it to, so essentially this is effectively, going from 1,000 pixels or 1,003 pixels up. Okay. And then all I did is I added those classes to these orange containers with the proper labels so that you can see inside the demo what those are actually doing. And it does its job, as we saw earlier. Right? Pretty cool. Okay, equalizer. This is super easy to use. Okay, so let's look at this. Here I have a card layout. Okay, now let's go down to demo. And remember, in this card layout, there's 3 sections inside of a card. We have a title, we have a feature list, and then we have buttons. Now, some of you might think, oh, I want to add the... hold on, let me turn off my notifications really quick. There we go. You might think, oh, I want to have all cards be the same height. So I need to add the cards. I need to equalize all 3 cards. But that's not what we want. We don't want to equalize the size of the cards. Okay? We want to equalize this features set. Because that is the section of each card that is different. The buttons will always have the same height. This header area, I guess that depends if you have a large header or extra long header. It could flow onto 2 lines, which could potentially make it look different. Okay. But for this simple example, I can pretty much guarantee that my headers are going to be 1 line. And if they ever go on to 2 lines, probably what I would need to do is just change the layout to go from 3 columns to maybe 2 columns or 1 column, right? So that, I can ensure that these headers will always be, Or you can use something like fit text to make sure it's always one line or something. No, don't do that for cards because you don't want the sizes to be all different. Okay, so in here I have a swatch. Okay, now let's look at this. The swatch for equalizer looks a little bit different than most swatches. So let's go through some of the settings. So first off, you have to have a parent class, okay? And this is a class that will contain everything that you want to be equalized, okay? So this has to be a parent container of everything that contains all of the equalized elements, okay? So in this case, I'm pretty sure I added it to the 3-column stack, I think. Oh, maybe I added it to the tabs content. So I added it to tabs content, okay? And that contains all of the cards. I could have added it to the 3-column or the tab content or the tabs content. As long as it's on a layout that will ultimately contain everything that is going to be equalized. Okay. Okay, so that's the parent class. Here we can equalize by the row, which says only equalize the elements when they are on the same row. So like if I were to change my layout so that it's 2 and then 1 below, I can make it so the one that's below isn't going to be equalized. It'll be auto sized. Okay, so that's convenience. And then you can also do equalize when stacked, which means make sure that even when they're stacked on top of each other, they should be equalized. And then you can set equalize on. And when you set this to be small, it'll equalize on small, medium, and large. When you set it to medium, it will equalize on medium and large. And when you set it to large, it'll equalize just on large. So that gives us some flexibility on when we can equalize. And lastly, this equalize class is going to be the class that we add to all the elements that we want to be equalized. Okay, so for this example, this features divider area. Okay, if you look for all 3 of them have the features class. Okay, so on this divider area, this is the element that I wanted to be equalized in all 3. So all you need to do is add the features class inside all 3 of them. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what happens if I do card on this. And essentially what we're going to do is we're going to equalize the card. And there we go. If you look, that doesn't give us the solution we want. It made all 3 cards the same height, but that still looks horrible. Right? That's definitely not what we wanted. So, yeah, just to kind of show you, I know a lot of people will do that by default. They'll think, I want all 3 cards equalized. I'm going to apply a class to every card and then, do that. But no, you need to figure out which sections within the card you want to be equalized for it to look correct. Oh no, what did I think I typed something wrong. See, even that happens to me. I'm a bit confused. We could equalize cards before. What is the difference? You could not equalize cards before. Equalizer. So Jody Joy is asking us, can't match height do what equalizer does? Yes. If you're using match height, equalizer and match height are very similar. Match height actually has probably a little bit more features than equalizer does. So if you have match height, yes. The benefit of equalizer is it can be a swatch and you can apply to multiple things. So yes, if you have match height and equalizer are very, very similar. Okay. You can use them to do the same things. And yes, as Fernando, I said, we couldn't equalize cards before, so I'm not sure. Maybe you just happen to have your content be the same, or maybe you set them to be a static height with the swatch. But yeah, right now you can't dynamically equalize the height of cards. Can you have two equalizers working on cards? One for the top section, one for the middle section? Yes. Oh man, it opened 3 projects all at once. So let's see here. There it goes. Oh. Of course, the one file I wanted to open is not opening. Sorry, 1 second. Let's open up that file again. Okay. Now we're back. Where were we? Okay, equalizer. Okay, FA5 styles. So we'll look inside of this block grid. I have Font Awesome icons disabled in edit mode, just to make things a little bit faster. If you're not disabling Font Awesome icons in edit mode, you might want to try it if you want things maybe a little bit more performant. So inside site styles, if you go into your Font Awesome swatch, just go ahead and uncheck the load icons in edit mode. And that will make it so you can't see the icons in edit mode, but it really does help with performance of edit mode. So if you're okay with not seeing the icons in edit mode, I definitely recommend you turn that off. Okay. So there we go. Let's go back down to that. Okay, here we go. So in here, you'll notice that I have, a bunch of Font Awesome icons, and they're just inside of an HTML stack. And it's just, there's nothing special in them. They have just the Font Awesome code. I didn't add any classes, no nothing. Okay. So let's look at some swatches that I have here. This first one allows us to, I'm targeting solid icons and light icons. Okay. And what's kind of cool is you can target all of the icons within a particular layout. So here I'm providing a parent class of icon grid. And I think I added that to, this block grid here has a parent class of icon grid. Okay, so essentially what this is doing is it's targeting all light and solid icons inside the icon grid. Okay, so there we go. So I'm applying some hover styles where we can apply basically, well, here it looks like my icon colors are the same, so that doesn't really matter. And then you can provide custom sizing. So this sizing is going to size all the icons to 50 pixels, 60 pixels, and 70 pixels, so that they're all uniform. And we can define, as you see, different sizes for different breakpoints. Okay, so the next one will target a parent class of red icon. So I think if we look at some of these block grid cells, if you look at some of the block grid cell, I have various things. So like this cell has blue icon, this one has red icon, this one has red icon, and this one has blue icon, right? So it allows us to target all of the icons within a parent class called red icon. And here I'm styling those red, and on hover, they're going to be orange, right? So over here, if we look, this red one, when I hover over it, it is orange, okay? Same thing with these blue ones. When I hover over it, it's going to be green, okay? And I'm pretty sure that's what this one does. So this one, it does blue icon, blue, hover, green. There you go. So this is a really simple swatch to use, but it's just, it does make it easier to style our icons to make sure that icons on our page are a uniform color. So Fernando says that he found how he did it and he used a height swatch. So yes, you could use a height swatch to equalize cards, but again, it's not going to be dynamic like Equalizer will do for you. Okay. You're defining a height based on either a container size or a browser height or a fixed size, right? So there we go. Next is gradients. Okay, there's some cool gradients in here. I need a quiet dog swatch. Yes, I do. My wife got home, so my dogs were excited to see them. Okay, so let's look at some of these. Let's go in order that I have here. So the conical URL, or conical gradient. A lot of these swatches have very similar settings. There are 3 different gradient swatches. There is a radial gradient, a conical gradient, and a linear gradient. Okay. So all of them are slightly different settings, but mostly they're going to be very similar. So let's look at the conical gradient. Basically, I added, a class conical. And let's look at the setup here. Actually, let's go to a simpler one. I'm going to actually start off with the linear gradient, just because it's definitely a simpler one to look at, and I think most people understand the linear gradient. So, obviously this one this one I'm doing animated, but here, this linear gradient right here. Okay, this one is this linear gradient right here, this blue one. Okay, so this is grad dash linear. If we look here, the gradient style, we can do just a simple 2-color gradient, a multicolored gradient, and then layered gradients. Okay, I'm going to use these examples within the gradients, this linear gradient swatch to show you. Okay, so we'll start off with a simple 2-color gradient, which allows you to define a starting color and an ending color. And if you look here, we have the starting color and the ending color. We define the position, so it starts at the top left. Do you want it left middle? It's basically the direction of the gradient. Okay, so this allows you, again, to define the direction the gradient is going. So if I were to do this right top, okay, or let's do some center top, okay, it kind of defines where the position of the gradient is positioned within the element. Okay. Next is scale. I'm not going to confuse this with scale. I'm gonna skip that right now. When we do this animated on hover, I'll show you a use case for that. Okay. Let's look at this gradient setup down here. So here we have our 2-color gradient, and then we have the angle at which, and that allows us to define the actual angle. If you look at now, it's angled down, right? So you can change the angle of the gradient. Okay, as you see, it's changing here as I'm changing this angle of the gradient. Okay, next we have, again, start color, ending color. And then you can also define these start, end, and mid allows us to define where the colors start, where they end up in the middle, and where they end. Okay, so you can kind of play. What's kind of cool about these is you can really play with these. And obviously, like, having a start after the end gives you a very solid line, which is not what you want most of the time, right? But allows you to define kind of where the colors start. You could play around with these sliders to kind of see, how the color changes. You can adjust the midpoint. Again, you're probably going to want start, end, and mid, to be, not one before the other. They need to be in order. Actually, come to think of it, I should probably have mid in the middle of start and end, to be honest. But anyway. Okay. So that's a simple 2-color gradient. Let's move on to a multicolored gradient. When you click on multicolored gradient, you'll notice that there are other buttons here where you can add an additional 4 colors to your gradient. So this color still starts this the start and ending colors, okay? But then these here allow you to add intermediate colors. And you can add up to 4 intermediate colors. So you can customize the color to be whatever you want. So like if I want purple here, and then I want red, and let's just do 2 for right now. And then we can kind of adjust the positions here. So if we adjust the position of this one to be 50, and this one is there, Here, let's start this one there. There we go. You know, there we kind of get, you know, where you can add multiple color gradients and all that kind of jazz. So there we go. I don't think these colors really look like, if the red is really, really bad. If we were to add something a little different, maybe that meshes more. There we go. Kind of looks a little nicer, right? So you can really add it. And again, you can have up to 6 colors now in a gradient. And then again, you can still provide the angles, even with multi-colors, right? And all that jazz. So really cool stuff. Okay. Next up is layered gradients. And I'm going to review this last, okay? Because layered gradients, essentially you can add as many gradients as you want, and you can stack gradients on top of each other, which is kind of crazy, okay? And I'll show you the example that I've built here in this file. Okay. Let's set this back to where it was. Okay, so that is linear gradient. Now that I've gone through all the options in linear gradient, the other stacks will actually be pretty simple. So let's look at the radial gradient. Same exact options here. We have 2-color, multicolored, and layered gradients. Oh, this is the layered gradient. Do I have a simple radial? Here's the simpler radial gradient. So here I have a 2-color radial gradient. We can still set the size and the position. And if you see here, the options are a little bit different. We can set our shape, whether we want the shape to be elliptical or a circle. And then we can set the origin, which is where the circle starts. So here I set it to 0, 40%. So the circle starts around here. Okay, but you can change that. Like, so if you wanted it to be, you know, let's say 40, 0. Okay, that will then, now if we look at that, that option puts it up here in the middle. Okay, actually, if we set it to like 50%, it would probably be nice because it would be right in the middle, right? And that creates that radial gradient. So the origin allows you to define the origin of the particular shape. Okay, either whether the circle or the ellipse. Okay, and all the other settings are exactly the same as linear gradient. So we could have the start position, the end position. If you wanted multicolors, you can add multiple colors, and you can add all of those just like you could with the linear gradient. Obviously, in this case, it would just be using a radial gradient instead. Okay, next up is the conical gradient. Okay, this is definitely kind of tricky. Okay, because I'm going to set the origin to be 0, 0 on this. Let's preview that. Oh, wait. I'm sorry. I think the default's 50-50 actually. Okay. This is what a conical gradient looks like by default. Okay. It has a really harsh line depending on the colors that you choose. Okay. Which really isn't probably great for a design aesthetic. But if you notice, what I did here is I set the origin to -2 on the y-axis, right? And what that did is that brought that point to be -2 pixels up here. And by doing that, it gave me it gives you a very beautiful like color spectrum here. Where it is very interesting, and it kind of hides that point. We still see a little, kind of dip right here where it definitely we see something here, but it's not like that dramatic, that huge ugly line, right? So I think conical gradients can be, when used in this fashion, can be used for very nice subtle gradients that I think really can add depth and some, kind of gives you like a more movement feel because it looks like it's more natural, right? So I think there's some really great uses. Maybe one day we can maybe on Friday, if you join us at the Hangout on Friday, we can, play around, search the web for some really cool uses for canonical gradients. and see how we can integrate those into our designs. Okay, but all the other options are the same as radial gradients. You can add, multi colors. You can add the 2-color. You can even layer them on top of each other. Okay, so that's conical gradients. Next up, let's look at this really cool example of a layered gradient. And so essentially what we do, this is kind of tricky, this example here. Okay, let's look at what I did. This has 3 colors. The first color goes from red. Okay, it's 80% red to 0% red. Okay, so we go from a transparent red to a fully transparent color. So basically it fades to nothing. Okay, let's go ahead and turn off the first 2 colors. Oops, what did I do here? So let's look at this example here. Okay, this is a radial gradient, by the way. And if we look at this small example here, hopefully you can see that, we're going from red to fully transparent red, okay, to nothing. Then I'm gonna layer a second gradient on top of that, and on that it's 80% green to transparent. So now I'm filling in this transparent area from this red gradient with the color green. And then I change the origin so that it's down here. And I change the angle. Okay, so this is a radial gradient that's gonna start here and go out. Okay? And then if I add that third color, we're gonna fill in this bottom area with the blue. Right? So that allows us, again, and the blue is going from a solid color to fully transparent as well. So that allows all 3 colors at the end of their spectrums to let the other color bleed through. But then, in some parts, those gradients are going to overlap. But because there's opacity, the gradient below it bleeds through and those colors really blend. And you can get a really amazing layered gradient like that. So that is like really beautiful. Like this layered gradient stuff, when I built this, hopefully it's not, I think it's not too complex. I think it's pretty simple concept how I just explained it now, where you add one gradient, you add another, and then we're adding another. And when you have all 3 of them together, it's just like, that's pretty awesome. Okay. And we could do these layered gradients with radial, linear, and conical gradients. Okay, cool. Okay, let's look at this animated gradient. So this particular gradient here, if you notice when I hover over, okay, it animates. And essentially what this is doing is we create a gradient, we make it the background that is bigger than the element, and then on hover, we're just moving it back and forth. Okay, so when I unhover, the background, it's like having a background image. You could actually do the same exact animation with an image. Okay, I'm just using a gradient instead. So let's look at that. So here we go. Here is my animated gradient. Okay, it's just a linear gradient. Okay, that goes from red to blue. Now what's key here is I set the position to be right middle. And then if you look at my scale, I make it 200% the width of my container. So I scale the gradient to be 200% the width. Again, that makes it two times bigger than the container that it's inside of. Okay. Then we have a background props swatch. This is a swatch that comes with the swatch pack. Okay. And essentially what I'm doing is I'm changing the position. Remember, the position was right middle. I'm changing the position on hover to be left middle. Okay, so right now on the unhovered state, the position is right middle. Okay, think of this gradient as just a big image, and we have lined it to the far right. Okay, and then when I hover over it, it's going to want to change that background position to the left side, which contains the red. And essentially and then obviously, if you're familiar with the transitions, we can then animate the background position with the transition swatch, and we define the time. I set it to be 5 seconds. Pretty cool, right? Now, I said earlier you could actually animate this on page load, okay? And that's 100% possible. It'd be hard to do this because this is further down the page, and if I reload this page, it's going to go to the top. But I'll essentially tell you how you would do it. If you hover over this parent class setting, and if you read this tooltip, hopefully everybody reads the tooltips because there's some really cool knowledge in there. And here's a perfect example. If you hover over the parent class option, you'll see that there's a few classes that you can add to this that will be useful. And the first one is loaded. And this is a class that's assigned to the entire web page once the web page has completely loaded. Therefore, if I were just to change this, instead of doing this on hover, if I do loaded, okay, let's preview. Let's see if that's going to work. There we go. Oh, there it goes. Boom. I see on page load, we initially get the gradient on the blue state, and then it animates through. Now, if we wanted maybe a little bit cooler, we can actually add a slight delay on that. So let's add like a 2-second delay. Oops, not 2 milliseconds. We'll add a 2-second delay, and let's preview that. 1,000, 2, 1,000. Boom, animation. Okay. So there we go. That's really cool, right? So if you never knew how you can add stuff, I think the loaded was added, I think, in Foundation 6.7, I think. But that's a very useful thing when you want to apply animations to things on page load. And the animation will only happen once. So like this will never animate back. It's not on hover. It's just a one-time thing on page load, and that's it. Okay, so yeah, that's a very cool thing. Yeah, if you haven't played around with that, the options are pretty awesome with that. And again, remember, always check out the tooltips. There's some really cool stuff in some of them. So parent class has some. There's also you can target, if you see here, you can target touch and no dash touch. So if you want to target a touch device or a non-touch device, you can use those classes as well. Cool. Okay. Sorry, I'm going a little bit long. Hopefully you guys are sticking with me, though. We're already at an hour and a half. So, man, my gardener, I know he's probably coming pretty soon, too. So lawnmowers are coming. Okay, swatches, or swatch SVGs. So, I had an interesting conversation with a user on the community about SVG Swatch yesterday. Maybe you saw the post, and there was a little misunderstanding, but we ultimately got to it. It was interesting. We want to check that out. In the examples here, you'll notice that I just paste in some SVG code. And the user had put in classes inside of his SVG. And you can do that, but that's not required. There's an easier way to do this. Okay? So if you just add the class to the SVG swatch itself, okay, we'll go through all of the options here. But I just want to say that, while you can target individual things within an SVG by hand coding classes inside of it, the easiest way to do this is just add the class to the SVG stack itself. and then we can apply the swatches to it. Okay, so let's look at some of these things. Let's look at her. I should have done this. Let's see, that's SVG fill. Just so that I know what all these examples are, I'm going to put that SVG mono. This is SVG outline. There we go. Okay. Now this SVG swatch is actually really full featured, and we can do some really cool stuff. So let's look at this SVG fill version first, okay? And let's see, what does that do on hover? It just changes the fill color. That's it. Pretty simple. Okay. So here we go. I have an SVG swatch, and I set the class to be SVG fill. And in this particular thing, it all depends on your SVG that you're using. So a lot of these are going to be different depending on what your SVG is, okay? And so I had to make this swatch flexible so that we can work with any types of SVG code, okay? So it may require a little bit of fiddling. Most of the time, setting this to be just SVG or path will work properly. So, you know, basically what this says is with SVG fill, target all the paths within the SVG. So in this particular case, the app that I generated this particular SVG uses paths, okay? And a lot of these paths have fill colors already defined inside of there, okay? So essentially, I would need to override all of those paths within the SVG, okay? So that's why we're going to target the paths. And I have all possible SVG things that we can target, okay? I think the default is just SVG. And again, that will work on a lot of SVGs. But if SVG isn't work, try path, and path might work, will most likely work for you. Okay, but just try a lot of these options. Again, it just depends on your SVG. It's impossible for you to know since I have zero control over what this SVG code is because you're just pasting it in from some app or some export or something online, right? Okay. So here I have one SVG path. I set the fill color to be purple. And here I set the pseudo state to be hover. And then I set the fill to be a different color, right? Pretty simple. And then I have a transition swatch that transitions that color so that it has that nice fade effect, right? And that's what we get here. Okay. So that was pretty simple. That just affects the fill. And as see, we can do hover animations as well. Now, you don't need to do the hover stuff, right? If you just wanted to make sure that all your icons or all your SVGs are purple, you could just have and have them statically purple. You don't need to do all the hover stuff. Okay, so at that point, you wouldn't even need this swatch or this swatch. You could just trash those, okay? And then your swatch is just permanently purple. So there, now our SVG is permanently purple, no hover animations. Okay. But now let's move on. Let's look at this SVG mono. Okay, I thought this was kind of an interesting one. So this SVG has a bunch of colors preset, and there's a bunch of paths, and all those paths have different colors, right? So it's a more rich. It's not just a static, boring one like this purple rocket is, right? There's different colors going on in here. Okay, so what I thought would be interesting is if we look at this one. Okay, so I only have two swatches. So actually, by default, I'm not applying any colors or styles to this SVG. I'm just using the default SVG styles. But what I'm doing here is on SVG mono, on path, on hover, I'm setting it to gray. So what we do is when I hover over, all those colors are changing to gray on hover. So that could be a nice, like, subtle, a subtlety where you're basically going, from something detailed when you hover over it. Maybe you're making it gray and then you're going to, I don't know, maybe you can show some text as well or something like that, at that point, because the more subtle color is going to be grayed out, right? So there's a bunch of tricks there, right? So we're using the colored SVG out of the box, no styling by default, and I'm only applying a swatch on hover. Okay. And then obviously we have the transition swatch to do the transition animation. Okay. Next is the SVG outline swatch. Okay. And this allows us to do some things that we haven't showed you yet, right? And that's this stroke feature. Okay, where we're applying the color, the size, the dash, and we could also do caps, right? Which is essentially SVG says the end of our line, is it going to be rounded? Is it going to be dashed? Is it going to be squared off? So all kinds of stuff, right? Some interesting stuff. So yeah, so this allows us to apply, here I'm applying a transparent fill so that it's going to be transparent. And then I am then applying, colored dashes. And you can apply, you can change the width of those and all kinds of stuff. And what am I doing on there? Oh, here I'm applying, then basically on hover, I'm doing, I'm applying the fill to it. Okay, so pretty interesting. And then I'm changing the size of the border to be 0. So there we go. Some fun stuff with SVGs. I think the possibilities here are very interesting. We can do some very intriguing stuff by manipulating our SVG colors and whatnot with a swatch. Okay. Next up is tables. I think that's, yes, you can inside the SVG stack, you can add a link to it. So yeah, that's not something with a swatch, because you would never want to apply a link via a swatch, because you don't want everything to have the same link, right? So yeah, you can have a link on an SVG. So there you go. Yep. Yeah, Gary, sorry I missed your question, Gary. If you want to make this SVG a button, you just click the add link button, and there you go. Done. Okay. Next up is tables. So let's look at this default one here, this styled table. Okay. And again, this just uses the tables stack inside of Foundation 6. But the swatch should be able to work with any table stack in theory, right? It should be able to work to style any table stack. It shouldn't be limited to just the Foundation 6 table stack. Okay, but the examples here use the Foundation 6 tables. So here, let's look at the style table, which is okay. It's just these first two, actually. Oh wait, no, it's just this one swatch. This one swatch actually styles this one table. Okay, and let's look at this. So here you have to define a parent class, okay, which is styled table, and that will go to into the table stack. Okay, and then we apply what we want to style within that table. So do we want to style the entire table? Do we want to target just a single column? Do we want to target just a row? Or do we want to target a specific cell? Okay. So in this case, in this first example, we're going to do the simplest example, which is targeting the entire table. Okay. And there's two different sections here. We have the ability to style the table head and the table body. So you can have different styles for the headers and then a different style for the body. In here, I'm using just the default table body, okay? But on the table head, I'm adding a background, okay? So I add a background color, which is a blue, and then we have alternate colors as well. And then I'm applying the text style, which is the text colors. And we can add a border as well, which gives us border options. And then we can actually apply styles to each individual cell border. Okay, so there is a difference between a border around the entire header versus the border on each individual cell. Okay, so those are two different things. Next, you can apply different paddings. You can apply static widths to things. You can apply a height if you want a specific height, right? So if you want maybe a taller header and all that type of jazz. So all these options allow us to apply styles to the table head. Then you can do font size, font weight, and italic. Okay, and that all comes with text. Then we have all these same exact options for the body, right? So we can customize the backgrounds, we can do borders, we can do cells, we can do text styles, paddings, heights, and widths. Okay, and again, this will apply to the entire table body. Now let's look at the more targeted example, where we're targeting a specific column, we're targeting specific rows, and we're targeting it in an exact cell, actually. So this is 4 different swatches. So here, I'm targeting, if you notice, the table body is all one color, because by default in Foundation 6, the colors alternate. So in this swatch, I'm targeting the entire body, the entire table, and I'm making the background white for the entire table body. Then if we go to table styles, in this particular example, I am targeting a column, and I'm targeting the 3rd column. So we set column, the nth column is 3. I set my header to have a background of green, my body to have a background of green. So at that point, the 3rd column, 1, 2, 3, the entire column, the header, as well as the table body, will all be green. Next up, this example here targets a row. So we set row to the 4th row, and I'm setting the 4th row is only going to be a table body. It will never be the header, so I don't set anything in the head. So the 4th row for the body is going to be green. So at that point, the 4th row is green. Then the last thing is an example where I'm styling a specific cell. So basically, the 6th column, 4th row, we're going to have a custom style for that one cell that has the background of red and then these text styles. So there we go. That gives us very granular control over our tables, even down to the individual cells, so that we can style our tables however we want. Cool. Wow. Oh my goodness. I can't believe where I have so much more to go. Feeling in my speaker box here. Okay, toggler. I may start to speed up a little bit, guys. This is getting long. Okay. Toggler. First off, let's go over really quickly. I'm going to breeze through this toggler. So I have this class called toggler demo that is styled somehow. Oh. Okay. So if you notice here, this box has a default style where it's gray. It doesn't. The icon is invisible, and when we hover over it, when we add that toggler, when we add a particular class to this toggler demo, it then turns blue with white text, and we have an icon. So pretty cool there, right? Okay. So let's look at that. So let's look at the default styles for toggler, or for this toggler demo. Okay, so toggler demo is the class. So here we have toggler demo. It is we have a gray background. Okay. Hold on, I should have organized this a little bit better, I guess. Okay. Okay. We'll back up. Let's look at the toggler stack. Okay, let's explain the toggler swatch first. And this could be a little confusing until you actually implement it. Okay, because there's a few different things that you need to find. There's 3 different classes being used here. First off, what do we want to target? So at the top of the toggler swatch, we want to target toggler demo. Okay. And that's exactly what we talked about. This is our target. This is what we want to style differently. Okay. Then if we look down here, we have trigger. Okay. And the trigger, this is the thing, this is the external element that will trigger the toggle event. So here I have a trigger class of clicker. Okay? The action is going to be click. You can also have options to only trigger something once, and you can also toggle only child elements. Essentially what that means is you can toggle only children elements of the trigger itself. Can you lock them in the laundry room? Gardener came. Dogs went nuts. Sorry, everybody. Okay, so again, in this case, the trigger element here is a button that has the class of clicker. And whenever I click this, it's going to trigger toggler. Okay, again, that's the trigger element. Okay, and the last setting here is the toggle class. This is the class that is going to get added to this element in order to style it differently. Okay, so once I click on this element here, let's show this to you live in the browser. Let's find that element here. Make this bigger. Okay. This is the element. You'll notice this is the toggler demo. Okay, this is it. Now, when I click this button, what you'll notice is it now has a class of toggled. This toggled class did not exist before. By adding that toggled class, it's applying additional styles from other swatches to this container, making it look different. And it also triggers animations, all with swatches. And if I click it again, that toggle class is gone. By removing that toggled class, it now reverts to the default styles. Now, had I inside the swatch set this trigger once setting, once a class is added, it won't remove it. So it only allows you to, it'll add it one time, but then it'll never remove it, right? So that's good for certain scenarios. But this is very powerful. This allows us to add classes dynamically on the fly via either clicks or hovers on other elements. So let's dive into the swatches that were used to make this. Okay, I should notice I have two togglers here. This second one targets the same thing, although this time I use a trigger class of hoverer. That's a horrible word, hoverer. And in this one, instead of being an action of click, it's an action of hover. Okay, and then it toggles the same exact class. And then that is added to this button. So here on this particular button, this hover demo button, I added the class hoverer. And that will then do the same thing that the click button does. Okay. So let's look at some of these things here. Toggler demo. So this is just the straight up toggler demo. It has a background of gray. That's the default style. Okay. Now you'll notice I added something a little bit different. And this is something you're just kind of have to know. Okay. So here, if we look at the class, I have toggler demo dot toggled. Okay. By adding that dot toggled on there, I am going to override the gray with this blue color when something has the class of toggler demo and toggled. Now remember, this toggled is the class that you add inside the toggler swatch. So whatever class is here is what you would add here. Okay. Same thing, text colors. I have a text color swatch. I'm going to change the colors to be white when I have the toggled class added to the demo. Then I have the transition, which basically, does the transition of the animations. Here I have a transform that, if you notice, when I trigger the transform, this box gets bigger. Well, that's all done with this transform. So when I have the toggled class on there, I scale that by 10%. I do 1.1 scale. So again, when it's toggled, I'm doing a lot of things here. So this is a very involved thing. I'm changing background colors. I'm changing text colors. We're transforming it, right? Making it zoom and kind of pop out. Now let's look at that icon, right? This icon isn't there by default, but it shows when I trigger it. So let's look at that icon. That icon there, I have the toggler icon class on it. Okay. And by default, I set that to be an opacity of 0. So by default on page load, it's invisible. Then I added another opacity swatch that when the parent class is toggled, so when the demo that is above it is toggled, make the trigger icon have an opacity of 1. Again, so when we add the toggled class to the little toggle demo, the icon says, oh, hey, I see my parent has the toggled class, so I'm going to let you see me now. And there we go. Then I added transition swatch to the icon so that it actually fades in and fades out. I also, another thing that you don't necessarily notice, I forgot I actually did that. Oops, that broke for some reason. I remember what I did wrong. Shoot, I changed this. I forgot to update this. What we can do here is I can actually rotate that on hover, right? So here, hold on one second. Let's just set that to be. Let's do like. Okay, so what I'm gonna do here is, man, glad I found this. So here I'm adding a rotation of 135 degrees, and then when we hover over, so basically when we toggle it, it'll rotate back to 0. So here, let's preview that. Let's remove this. So there we go. So now the icon, actually, if you notice, the icon spins while it's fading in. That's pretty fun. Right before I shipped this, I changed some of these options, and I broke the existing implementation. So I need to fix that, and I'll update the project. So there you go. Pretty cool, though, right? Yeah, that's a nice little touch, having that not only fade in the icon, but also spin it in. Pretty cool. I like that. So that's toggler, right? Toggler is, again, very, very powerful. Okay. I'm not going to review. I'm just going to tell you right now, I'm not going to review this. I did an entire live stream on this one banner. Okay. I'm not going to review that today. Okay. You can see the implementation. I organized it into different pens so that it is, organized. There's a lot going on there. Okay. If you step through it step by step, it's pretty, should be understandable. Okay. Let's look at some of these simpler ones. Okay. So these boxes that shift and move. Okay. These guys right here. Let's look at some of those transform squares. That's these right here. Just going to hide that banner, the banner header thing. Okay. So these transform squares. The transform swatch allows us to, as I said, allows us to move things, scale things, rotate things, skew things, or both things. So you can move and scale, you can move and rotate, right? So you can do any combination of those things. So here I'm moving the square negative 20 pixels. Basically, you're moving it to the left 20 pixels, and I'm moving it down 20 pixels. Okay. And then essentially here on hover, right? Oh, here on hover, I'm essentially setting all of this to 0. So I'm setting move, scale, rotate, skew to 0 on all of the transforms. Okay. So yeah, and then I have a transition swatch as well. So here, the move one, again, I set the move to negative 20, 20, and it moves. For scale, I set that to be 1.2, and it scales. Okay. Rotation, set that to be 20 degrees. And skew, again, that allows you to skew things. Okay. Those are really simple. Okay. You can, those are very understandable. So just applying that one class to the container. So like in this, for instance, I have, I'm adding the skew class. So that skew class is added to this container here, and that will skew that, or rotate or scale or move based on those classes created by those swatches. Now, one thing that's interesting is I told you we're going to look at this button, that implementation, and it's interesting. Okay, it's not. I'll admit the effects that are going on are not logical, okay, until you understand them. So I thought it'd be fun to go over that. Okay, so here I have just a normal link stack. I set it to be a hollow button with a border radius, okay, and let's go over some of these things. So to start off with, I added an overlay BG, okay. I added an overlay background, okay, of purple. And what that does is that will add an overlay to this stack and make it purple. Okay. So yeah, but we then need to animate that. I guess what I kind of need to do is here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do this one by one here. I'm just going to basically disable all of these just by adding something to disable that effect. Okay, so now the only thing we have here is this overlay background. Okay, and let's preview that. And there we go. I now have this overlay background that's purple, but obviously that's horrible. I have a hollow button, but then I'm adding a purple overlay on top of it, and then my text is purple, so that just looks horrible, right? But we can do better. Okay, so so first off, well, I guess we'll work on the transform. Okay, so first off, we're gonna add a well, this transition actually is the animation part. Okay, so this let's add that after that. There we go. Okay, first off, we're gonna add a transform. And this one, actually, it took me a while to think of this implementation. I'm going to go ahead and fix this class name so that it's by button. Okay. If you look at this transform, it scales X to 0. So essentially what this is doing, if you look at me right now, you have a square and it's setting the horizontal scale to 0. So essentially it's going and it's squishing that overlay. Okay, so we're targeting by button before, which is what the overlay background swatch is. Okay, and we're squishing it. Now, if this was an image, it would look weird because it would squish the image. But because this is just a purple box, if it's squished or if it's 1,000 pixels wide, it just looks purple. So we're squishing it down to 0. So by previewing this now, we go from this purple overlay button to our normal button. Now that overlay is still there. We just squished it all the way down to 0 so you can't see it. Okay? Then we go ahead and add a new transform stack, a new transform swatch, and we add a hover event to that. Let me change this class to fix it so it's by button. And then we're scaling that to be 1. So we're going from 0 to 1 to 100% basically. So we're saying scale this on hover from 0 to 1. Okay, let's preview that. Boop. There it goes. Okay, so we got our purple background now. Okay, but we need to add an animation to it, and then we need to make the text white. Okay, so we know how to add an animation, so we add a transition swatch. We're going to delete that so that the class is the correct class. So we add a speed of 300 milliseconds. We apply the property just to the transform, and we set the pseudo state to be before because that's what we want to animate. We want to animate the overlay background, which is the before element. Okay, and then while we're here, I'm going to go ahead and set the font color on hover to be white. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So now when I hover over it, we get that animation and our text color is white. Mind blowing. Okay, now for this particular animation, what I'm doing also is I'm animating. So this is an interesting thing where I'm actually going to animate the text color. So we're animating the text color at a different rate than the transform. So we're animating the transform at 300 milliseconds. And then for the text color, I'm going to delay that by 150 milliseconds and make it a little bit slower. So 400 milliseconds. So let's see what the final animation looks like. So if you notice that the text color changes a little bit after about when that scale is about halfway through, then the text color changes and then it takes a little bit longer. So just playing around with some of these things just really makes it pop. And this last transition, just by tweaking the text color just by a little bit, making it having different animation timing than that overlay background, I think just really makes it makes a big difference. It really makes it the fine tunes that a lot. So there we go. That was a fun one to do. I really love this button now. We're probably going to see this button all over the place now. So go ahead and use it. Okay, man, my voice is yelling at me. We're almost at the end though. We're at the underscore, and underscore is actually really simple. Okay. So here I have a couple demos in the underscore, and let's look at some of these. So here in this menu one, we have underscores that are animating from the middle and they're animating out, right? So let's look at these. So here on this menu swatch, here let's go the underscore demo. So here I'm targeting all top level menus within a parent class of underscore demo. Okay, so if we go to this call out or this one column somewhere, here, this one column is a parent class set to underscore demo, right? So it's basically targeting all menus within this one column. Okay, so here we have we're targeting all top level menus, and in the underscore you have a default state and a hover state option. Okay, so in the default state you can change. You can either use this first setting here defines the color of the underscore. By default, it will be the same color as the text. Okay, for example, here, if I had set the menu one to be blue or to be text, the underscore will be the color of the text. You can then define a specific color. You could define a swatch color, or you can define your own custom CSS. So in this instance, I'm just going to use swatch color, which is alert, which will make, as you see here in the swatch, it'll make that underscore look like that. Here you can define the height of that underscore, the width of the underscore if you want to make it like a static width, okay, to start. So by default here, the default width is 0 pixels. But then here the underscore on the hover state, I'm setting it to 1x, right? So essentially we're going from 0, you can't see it, similar to that scale option on the button. Actually, the technique to handle these underscores is exactly what we just did on that button. So we're starting at 0. When we hover, we're ending at 1x. So it's gonna span the width of that text element. Okay. You can add some margins. Your alignment, do you want the alignment to be left, center, right? And that affects the animation as well. Okay. So if you look here, I'm starting it as centered, and on hover, I'm keeping it as centered as well. And that gives us this animation effect where it animates from the middle and it animates back to the middle. Okay. Then we have the offset, which allows you to kind of adjust that up or down. So you can make it closer or farther away. If you look at this demo here where the hovered link is, okay, you can see what the default state is and what the hovered state is, all within the underscore swatch. So it allows you to kind of tweak these options here. Okay. Okay. Let's look at the next demo. Okay. Here I use a few different options. Here I'm using the CSS option, which actually, if you look, gives it a gradient underscore, okay, which is pretty cool. I define the height, same thing with the width. Now here, if you notice here, I am doing alignment right by default and an alignment left on hover. Now, why would we want to do that? Well, when we do that, essentially what that does is it gives us that effect of the underscore starting at the left, going all the way to the right, and when we unhover, it basically goes out the same direction. I'm going to go ahead and change this to be left and left, and we'll see how that changes. So when I hover over the link, we'll see we see that the line animates out from left to right. And when I unhover, it goes back from right to left. So, that's a valid animation too. It's a nice animation, okay? Depending on what you want, that could be exactly what you want. But I do kind of like the cool little hip look of this. When you animate out, it animates the opposite direction. And basically, it always goes left to right. And you can also, if you set that to be left and then right here, you can have it always going right to left as well, right? But I just think that's a pretty cool animation there. Okay, guys, and with that, we're pretty much done. I do want to show a couple here. Let's show a couple things. I've showed the background props a little bit. Color override. Let's just add that to the. I'm going to add. Let's open up my sandbox project here. Okay. Let's add a color override swatch. Did I add that to components? Yes. So there is a color override swatch. What is that? So the purpose of this, a lot of times, there are a lot of things in Foundation that use these component colors, right? Buttons, things like accordions and tabs. They use these colors because those are the colors of the Foundation components. Now, let's say you wanted to customize one of these colors for something. Right, before you would have to add a component swatch and then add a class and then change the one color you needed to tweak. That seems like a waste because we're defining all these colors, but we really only needed one. Okay, so that's where this color override option comes in, where you can define an exact color that you want to override. So if you want to override the warning color, or if you want to override the white color for a particular thing, you can override just that color for a particular foundation component. So that's what the color override option is for. A couple other ones. I know Z-index is a popular one for various things. This allows you to obviously just attach a Z-index to something, right? Pretty simple. What are some other? We talked about the unset, right? So here you would do unset. You would define the CSS attribute that you want to unset, and that's it. Okay. Now, one thing here I want to show is this pseudo content stack. This is a pretty cool implementation. Okay, I'll show you a couple other implementations also. Here, just for fun, we're gonna add add something to this page here. Just above this, we're gonna add there are other tricks that you can do with this. Okay, we'll just call this my head. Okay. I'm gonna add a pseudo content stack to the page. Okay, and let's just do live stream space inside quotes. Okay, so I have on the before element live stream space, and we're going to target my head, which is the what I added to both of these headers. So let's preview that. If you notice, what that did is that added live stream before each of those headers. Okay, and guess what? If you go to the pseudo content and you do after, preview that, it then adds the content after the element. Okay, pretty useful. What's the real life use case for that? So I found a pretty cool one. Okay, let's talk about forms. So I have this form. As you know, I said earlier today, I've been working on some forms this week, foundation update forms, or form updates, I should say. And let's say, like, I want to change this button based on the content inside of the button, based on the state of the form. Oops. So while the form is processing, I want the button to say something else. I don't want it to say submit. I want it to say submitting or processing. And then when the form is successful, I want to make the button say thank you. And if there's an error in the form, maybe make the button say something else. So let's do that with pseudo content. So what's kind of funky is to accomplish this, let's go ahead and I'm going to add, I'm going to put this label back on this button. Okay. And let's preview. If you notice, by default, okay, so I have the button set to have a label of submit. All right. But if we look at this, when I preview, it says submit. What the heck? Okay. Well, maybe I've jumped ahead a little bit. Let me go ahead and put this back to where it was. Let's look. I have 4 pseudo content swatches here. Okay. Here I have state button, which is the class that I've added this state button class to my submit button. Okay. And essentially, first I've added before I put a content of submit. Okay, on state button. Then I have state button. When a parent class is processing, add the content submitting. When the parent class is success, make the content thank you. When the parent class is error, make the content oh no. Okay, so how did I know these parent classes? Well, I wouldn't expect you to know them. And actually, in hindsight, I should probably add these classes into this little tooltip. This parent class tooltip would be a nice thing. So the foundation forms, when it's processing a form, it will add a class of processing to the form. Okay. So just to make this easy, I'm just going to go ahead and do this all within the inspector. So I'm going to go ahead and add a class of processing to the form. So I added the class of processing to this form. And if you notice, because I have the processing stack on there, we get that. But if you look at my button, it now says submitting. Right? Pretty cool. And if we add the class of success, it says thank you. Now, actually, you know, another thing, if you don't want to learn the dev inspector, if you just manually type in processing, okay, into the form stack, don't leave that there. Okay, but just for preview, if you want to test, you can just add the class of processing to the form stack, and you can see that that's what the form looks like when you're processing. And that is our button says submitting. And if we change this to be success, you'll see that we see the thank you button, and we see our thank you message. And if we have the error class, our button says oh no, and we see our error. So that's kind of an interesting way of toggling through and seeing the different states of your form. Okay. Now, one thing, if you notice here in my submit button, I made it blank. The label is blank. Okay. And the reason for that is the way pseudo elements work. Let's put in our submit like we had before. I'll put it in all caps so that we can kind of see the difference. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and make this form in the processing state. If you see here, remember how I added the pseudo content to a header and we can add the content before or after? Well, the same thing applies to a button, right? So it just puts submitting before the button text. And that's because here I'm using the before element. If I was using the after element, it would add it after the default button text. So how do we get around that? Well, we get around that just by having no label at all on the button. Okay. So now we have no label at all on the button, and we see only what is defined by the pseudo content stack. Now for accessibility, having no label on your button is horrible, okay? But luckily, we already had the ability to provide an accessibility label, so we can set the submit label for accessible content, so that, you know, accessible users actually have a proper label for the button. Okay? And there we go. We now have the best of both worlds. We have this dynamic changing button that will give visual feedback to users with the state of the form. And then for accessibility, we can still have our submit label. So yeah, that's a really cool option. I really like this. I thought it was a really clever implementation. And I hope you guys enjoy it too. So with that, I am done looking at all the various Swatch stacks. I went for 2 hours and 15 minutes today. I think that is the record for longest live stream so far. And my voice is definitely yelling at me right now. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but man, I'm feeling it definitely in my throat. For those of you that lasted, thank you. This was definitely a marathon live stream. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this. I think I answered all the questions. But if I didn't, please feel free to, ask on the community if you have any questions. And yeah, I hope you guys join us on Friday. We do live hangouts just like this, but we actually get to talk to me and interact with me. They're a lot of fun. So Friday is basically 1 hour from right now, but on Friday, or no, it's exact time right now. It's not 1 hour from now. Normally I say that. So 1:30 p.m. Pacific, which is, so there's all kinds of places. So go ahead, join us on Fridays at Hangouts. There's always a bunch of people join in. We have fun, we chat, we talk about web design and Macs and Apples and all kinds of other crazy stuff. So hopefully we'll see you there. And thank you very much for